Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Today's going to be a lot of fun. Tomorrow's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome to Epic Mock 25. I'm here with Bill, here with Drew, and there's a lot of you out there either watching this, you're going to be picking shortly. I want to say thank you, because this weekend is the summation of everybody's work. So we're on the podcast, but the amount of work that Drew has put in, Bill has put in for this entire draft cycle, and everybody else that is picking in Epic Mock 25, you guys have put in a lot of work. We are here. We're live 4 minutes before Drew goes on the clock, so we have a couple surprises for you. But Drew, how are you?
I'm doing the best I ever have. We've been waiting for this for so long. It's finally here. The Epic Mock, what everybody's been waiting on. I am so excited to get this thing kicked off.
Cool. And Bill, like, you were here when we started doing the podcast.
Yes.
It's so cool to have you at the beginning of Epic Mock, but how are you today?
Yeah, no, when we started this way back around Halloween, it was you, me, and Randall, and we had a dream of being able to do something like this. And to be able to put this all together for Epic Mock 25, it can't be understated the amount of work you put into this, Jim, the amount of work people like Drew and all the other draft professors put in. So for everybody watching, we want to thank you, first off, for allowing us into your homes tonight to put this on, have this great show. A little bit of housekeeping before Drew gets on the clock here. Make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you slam that notification bell. Get notified when this channel goes live with daily draft content. Make sure you put it in the comments. Chat it out in the comments. Tell me how I should be fired before the end of round 2. Please do it. I'm begging.
Please do.
Make sure you tag your friends, tag your family, tag your enemies, tag Drew and tell him how terrible he is for having the first overall selection.
Please.
And let's piggyback on that, because Bear Review, if you didn't know who he's picking for, I'm assuming that's a he, Chicago Bears, and I believe they are going to have a live feed. TJ, you've been here. You've been mock drafting with us on a lot of Fridays, picking for Dallas. Good to see you. Andy, you are part of the Denver Broncos war room. So thank you, and we'll see you probably in about 2 hours picking. Most importantly, Will, you and me have been mock drafting against each other for like 3 or 4 years. And we should note that ESPN stole Will's idea. So Mel Kiper was doing Draft a Team. The OG Draft a Team is Will drafting for Pittsburgh right there. Mike, path to the Jags. So part of the Jags war room. So thank you for being here. And pick 11. That's San Francisco, right? So this is John Chapman, I believe. So John, I have never spoke with you, but you are always very supportive of us doing this. So thank you for joining the event. And I look forward to seeing more draft content for you for the next 12 months. Yeah. But it is 6:15 or 6:14. Drew, the Tennessee Titans are officially on the clock.
On the clock. Here we go. And to start off, just want to shout out me and Bill, both with the official
draft
hats
on. We both have the draft hats.
We're
you
guys
got to check this out. Everybody's
locked in.
They have the draft hats. I missed the memo.
We're locked in. We're ready to go. We're all in. We commit to this. We are picks 1 and 2. We committed to this. We're all in. So, Drew, like Jim said, you're on the clock here. 6:15. You're on the clock. I think it's pretty well showcased what Tennessee's going to do. But out of curiosity for the fans at home, where are you thinking of?
Yeah, show the fans at home, Drew. You showed it to us.
Do I need to drain the whole 8-minute clock like we do in the actual draft, or do I just need to go ahead and get this out of the way?
Well, we need to give them time to get the jersey ready to walk across the stage.
That's true. You got to get them ready backstage.
Yes.
People think that that we had a trade go down actually between me and Bill right here. Will Levis is headed to Cleveland. For anybody that didn't catch that earlier on Twitter. So people, they jump straight to conclusions. They think they know what I'm doing with this pick. We're gonna see. We're gonna see what actually happens. But are we ready to turn this card in? Are we ready to go?
I think we're ready. I think the people are ready and raring to go.
Okay, we'll kick this thing off with the first overall pick in the 2025 Draft Professor Epic Mock 25. The Tennessee Titans select quarterback Cam Ward out of Miami. Right here.
Wow, what a selection. Such a shock to anyone who tuned into Epic Mock 25. So surprising. I got to say I love it and I hate it at the same time. Titans are selecting Jalen Walker. What a shock. It's Jalen Walker. We don't need Vontae Mack. We need Jalen Walker.
Jalen Walker.
What a shock. No, I love the pick for you. I couldn't be happier as well as hate you at the same time for taking the top quarterback in this class. But no, it was a pretty simple pick. I don't see any other way you could really go around it. But now Cleveland's on the clock, and it's not as clear cut as people would think. There's 3 names, obviously. When you throw out Cleveland, you throw out Travis Hunter, you throw out Shedeur Sanders, you throw out Abdul Carter. They could go in a multitude of directions, which just goes to speak to the state of the lack of talent in Cleveland. The Cleveland GM, which is subsequently me, working the phones all afternoon long, almost traded out of pick 2, had an offer, fell through at the last possible second. Decided to stick here and pick. Won't share who that trade with was, but almost traded out of pick 2 here just to try to play the board a little bit. But after wrestling with it, I think we finally know what the decision is going to be. So without further ado, with the second overall selection in the 2025 NFL Draft Professor Epic Mock 25 draft, the Cleveland Browns select quarterback Shedeur Sanders, University of Colorado.
Wow.
Back-to-back quarterbacks.
First big shock of this draft.
Yeah, back-to-back quarterbacks. And I appreciate you giving me Will Levis for a bag of chips, but with Levis and Pickett as a quarterback room and Watson all but done in Cleveland, you got to get the guy here. And at that point, it's just an easy decision. But Drew, what do you think about this one?
Well, that was honestly my biggest question going into this was are the draft professors going to buy the slide on Shedeur Sanders? How far are we going to see him fall in this epic mock? But he doesn't. He goes number 2 to Cleveland. And honestly, I love the fit with Stefanski's offense. I think how good he is in structure, how accurate he is, how smart he is with the football, that's something Kevin Stefanski has not had since he's been in Cleveland. And I think it's a great fit down there. They've got the QB coach that's got the history with Dion and his son. So I think, regardless of my personal opinion on Shedeur, he is kind of the second quarterback in the draft for most everybody, all the analysts we've got in here. And regardless of what the talent on the board looks like, sometimes you just have to fix the quarterback position before anything else. So, I think the future is bright in Cleveland, and they officially have their guy.
Yep. Absolutely. So we get to pick 3. The Giants are on the clock now. And if you're the Giants, this is probably doomsday scenario because yes, you have Jameis Winston. Yes, you have Russell Wilson, but are either of them a future solution for you? But you also end up with your choice of Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter here. So if you're the Giants, Drew, where are you? Where's your head at? Are you going Travis Hunter here? Are you reaching for Jackson Dart and go QB 1, 2, 3 and make it really wild?
I don't know if I can quite get that rich on a quarterback here. I think at this point, Joe Shane, I think at this point he kind of knows as soon as Shedeur went second overall, his future is kind of over. So I think at this point, your best chance of salvaging this team and salvaging your job is to go get Travis Hunter. Get the most diverse and valuable player in this draft. I still have Abdul Carter slightly higher, but I know Travis Hunter is the first overall player for so many analysts out there in this draft class. Arguably the best at either position, corner and receiver in this draft. He's going to add so much juice to either side of the ball, whichever one you play him at, whichever one he decides to play. And I think even if you got to run with a veteran bridge quarterback in Russell Wilson, you get a superstar playmaker in here like Travis Hunter, and that's probably your best bet at salvaging this train wreck that the Giants have been recently.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. For me, I'm with you on that aspect. I think it has to be Travis Hunter. I have Abdul Carter number 2, but I have some causes for concern. Obviously the first thing is the fit alone. You have Kayvon Thibodeau, you have Brian Burns. Can you afford to burn another pick on an edge rush when you have such other bigger needs that are glaring on your offense alone and your cornerback room? But also the injury concerns earlier today. Drew Rosenhaus announced that they had the medical recheck in Indianapolis and it was a non-issue. For what it's worth, I don't trust anything that Drew Rosenhaus says because it's agent speak, especially when it's reported from Schefter via Rosenhaus. So him saying it's a non-issue now makes me think that there is a major issue. So that's a concern for me. But some teams, the Giants right now, they may not be thinking that. They may be thinking, hey, we're going to go all in and we're going to just throw 15 edge rushers at this thing. They could shock the world too. They could go offensive line. Armand Membou at right tackle and Andrew Thomas on the left. That's going to be the protection they could go. That's another option. The obviously, like we talked about, yes, Jackson Dart's the third quarterback. I'll also throw Jalen Milroe. He's a big-armed, athletic guy. That's what Dable loves. It's what he had in Josh Allen in Buffalo. So it's another option to take. But I'm with you. I think quarterback at 3 is just absolutely too rich. But agreed.
And to speak on the Abdul Carter point too, I do remember once upon a time, when they said it was a non-issue for the pro day as well, and that ended up absolutely being an issue. So I am fully with you on seeing through this agent speak. I think that it's just as much. If it was ever an issue to begin with, it's probably still an issue. I don't think anything has changed with Abdul Carter. So, yeah,
no, I completely agree. So, but Giants on the clock here at pick 3. Obviously, we take a spin around the league, and there's a lot going on. We had quarterbacks go 1 and 2 here in the Epic Mock 25. A shock to some world. Folks all over Ohio right now are either jumping for joy or jumping out of the window of their second floor apartments, depending on how they feel about Shedeur. Folks in Colorado happy. Browns ticket sales for the new stadium that they're trying to build in Brook Park just went through the roof. I'm sure that Kevin Stefanski is absolutely ecstatic. But as we flip over to Nashville, how is the Nashville front office? How's Borgonzi and how's Callahan feeling about this Ward selection?
So at this point, I think this is, we've heard nonstop trade talks since before the combine, since the regular season finished at this point. And they were entertaining it for a while, but I think when you really saw things change was when they got Cam Ward on the whiteboard in Indianapolis. There were a lot of questions on his tape. I don't think anybody's arguing that he's a blue chip quarterback, but I think it is a pretty clear scenario where he's the best in this draft class. Tennessee desperately needs a quarterback after the Will Levis situation did not end how they wanted it to. Callahan needs his guy, to get in there and really give that system a chance. Borgonzi has been a guy that's with his Mahomes pick back in Kansas City, he's willing to take the upside. Yeah, these guys that are more raw, kind of risk prone coming out of college, but he's willing to take those shots. And I think Cam Ward, the way you really saw that flip around the combine, he got on the whiteboard, he got in the interview room and really just blew Tennessee away. The phones have been off, to my understanding, since the combine interview process. They really fell in love with him, the player and the person and the football mind that he is. They've had, the 30 visits, they've had the private workouts, they've had just about every touch point they could. And they are fully in love with Cam Ward, from what I know, and Tennessee gets their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and we're gonna break a little bit of news here. We got the producers in our ear, absolutely. So there is a trade that has been announced. The Jacksonville Jaguars sending the 5th overall selection, 88th overall, and a 2026 second round selection to the New York Giants. Jacksonville is now on the clock. What just a jawbreaker. Here's the question: are they coming up for Jalen Walker here? Is that what we're thinking?
Are we hearing that? I mean, it took less than 10 minutes for this thing to get started before we had a blockbuster trade. We're in for a great weekend right here.
Absolutely.
Do we have the pick in, or did they just trade it?
It looks like, based on the chat, the pick is in, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, according to Mike, select Travis Hunter, the corner wide receiver out of Colorado. So back-to-back Buffaloes here. Drew, first off, obviously blockbuster move by the Jaguars coming up to 3 to get Travis Hunter, but how do we feel about this fit in Duval?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a brand new regime in there, full clean house. You got a brand new head coach, brand new GM. They come in with a splash. You don't really see first-year regimes have the leeway and the leash to make these kind of moves. But they saw Travis Hunter fell out of the top 2. Apparently the Giants were shopping, ready to get up some more draft capital, and they took advantage to go up to get one of the only 2 blue chip players in this draft class, in my opinion. And he's, regardless of which side of the ball he plays on, whether you're putting him opposite of Brian Thomas or whether you have him as that staple in the secondary down there in Jacksonville, they're getting a franchise-changing player right here.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And we also think about the fit with Liam Cohen, too. He's a very offensive-minded guy. Yep. Imagine the packages he's going to draw up with Travis Hunter, and it's going to make Trevor Lawrence's life easier. But that's definitely something that you have to look at as well. So Patriots on the clock here at pick 4. And this is probably the most difficult selection that they're going to have, because the conversation is Abdul Carter versus do we protect Drake May at the left tackle spot in either Armand Membou or Will Campbell. There's been a lot of Jalen Walker smoke that's been around this Patriot team, kind of in the Patriot way. But as we wait for that Patriot pick to come in, Drew, where do you think New England, where do you think Vrabel goes in his first pick here in New England?
Yeah, see, this has been the toughest one from the very beginning, because you have, again, for me, Abdul Carter is still the best player in this draft class. So talent-wise, it's that. But, you look, and there's maybe not a bigger hole in the entire league on any roster than offensive line is for New England. And you have a guy like Armand Membou, who's as close as you can get to a lock to the top 5, 6, 7 at offensive tackle. He's got everything you want. It's really difficult, because you don't want to throw your franchise quarterback into another season behind a gaping hole offensive line at left tackle. You're going to get him hit, get him killed, really wear him down over the first 2 years. But at the same time, an edge rusher who's one of the best we've seen in recent years as a prospect fall into your lap at the 4th overall pick. That's an incredibly difficult choice. I would probably still lean Abdul Carter and maybe push into some of the depth of this tackle class. What do you feel about this, Bill?
Yeah, see, I could see that. I could see them going Abdul Carter, but I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I just think that Vrabel is going to be the guy that says, hey, I'm a defensive-minded head coach. I can get it done with an edge rusher in round 2, a Nick Scourton, a Kyle Kennard, or Princely Umanmielen, but I can't get it done with these revolving turnstiles they have at tackle. And yes, they signed Morgan Moses, but that's a Band-Aid over a flesh wound. I think you got to go left tackle here, and it all depends on how you feel about the Armand Membou versus Will Campbell conversation. For me, I would take Membou, even though he played historically right tackle. He's athletic enough to flip to that left side. At a bare minimum, you can keep him on the right side if you don't feel comfortable flipping him. Will Campbell, there's concerns about his ability to handle speed to power. There's the whole arm length conversation / controversy, depending on who's taking the measurements. It's either 32, it's 33, it's 32 and a half. That's neither here nor there. But I think it has to be an offensive lineman, but I've been wrong before, and I wouldn't be shocked if they went Abdul Carter here in New England. But that's kind of where I would lean. And would I be shocked to see them go offensive line? No. But with all the money they spent in free agency, I almost feel like it has to be an offensive lineman here. But then again, there is the Abdul Carter. He's my number 2 overall player on my big board. Probably one of the best players in this class when it comes to getting after the passer, when it comes to using speed to power to getting around that edge. Yes, there's concerns about him being, converted from a stand-up linebacker to his hand in the dirt. How are you going to use him schematically? Obviously, like we talked about at the top of the hour, the Drew Rosenhaus medical concerns that are kind of being an issue on draft night. But I think that's ultimately how does Vrabel and Elliott Wolf and Robert Kraft feel about this? How do they feel about Abdul Carter? Do they say, hey, the talent outweighs the issues that we're going to have? Or do we say, let's go elsewhere? Let's go with a Jalen Walker who fits what we want to do in the Patriot way, but doesn't have a home position, or let's go with a tackle and let's protect our franchise quarterback. So, but
yeah, I think that's a great point about the Vrabel thinking he can get it done with a second round edge compared to spending that at the fourth overall pick. But at the same time, we've seen Vrabel kind of push that away in Tennessee. We saw him kind of disregard that tackle position almost in the couple of years he was in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've got to look at the being a former player, the kind of alpha dog mentality that Vrabel has. You've seen how Abdul Carter has managed this whole draft process, this interview process, consistently insisting that he's the best player in this draft class. He's the number one overall player. It looks like we have a pick in. Is it in?
Yep.
Are we here?
The producer says the pick is in, and it is Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State, on his way to New England. So, like you were talking about, Drew, they ignored the tackle. They're going to come back around in the depth of this tackle class. We kind of saw it in Tennessee. You mentioned Peter Skoronski played tackle, kicked inside the guard, so that probably ruled out Will Campbell. But I think the Patriots get Abdul Carter here. Very good selection. Guys, number 2 on my board, he falls to number 4. But we're here at the Giants at number 5, and they traded down, picked up a 2026 second-round selection and the 88th overall selection in this draft. And you got to be concerned now if you're the Giants. You've missed on the quarterback in Sanders. You've missed on Hunter. You've missed on Carter. So where do the Giants go from here?
Yeah, I really do wonder if New York was banking on the Patriots going Armand Membou here and thinking they could slide down 2 and still get a blue chip player in Abdul Carter, but that's not how it fell. And this is, I think this is really, really where it gets strange, because I think your 3 absolute locks in Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter are all gone. I don't really know where you go. 5, you already mentioned Armand Membou, that could fit. But with the state of this team, how's the fan base and everyone in that organization going to react to taking an offensive tackle after you could have been in range for a Travis Hunter at this point? And there's so many different ways they could go. I wouldn't rule out quarterback here at 5 maybe at this point, since the blue chip guys are gone. Do you feel okay with that reach now that Carter and Hunter are gone? This is a wide open pick at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And when you look at the best players available on the board, you have Ashton Jeanty at running back. You really can't afford to take that swing. That's just going to make Joe Shane look crazy to let Saquon Barkley walk and then come back and get Ashton Jeanty here. And Tyrone Tracy's been very serviceable. They don't need to go that. Mason Graham is a defensive tackle. They run more of a 3-4 set, so I don't know if you're going to put Mason Graham over the nose like that, if that'd be effective. You look further down the board. Could this be a Tyler Warren selection? Tight end. Tight end in New York, you've got Theo Johnson, but you don't really have much behind him. So I could see the Giants going Tyler Warren here. Another big need would be corner, but it's a little early for the next corner on the board, which would be Will Johnson out of Michigan with the speed concerns. Ben
you don't
Morrison
think Barron would go ahead of Johnson with the injury?
I could see Barron here. The concern is his size and where you're going to fit him, whether it's corner or nickel or safety or some conglomeration of the 3.
Yep.
I think you need to go offense.
Yeah. Tyler Warren, the guy that's been compared to Jeremy Shockey throughout this whole process, ending up in that same Giants uniform. That would be fun. Probably a little rich for my blood, but I think he's been a guy that's been talked about in this range a lot. It could be a really fun kind of stunner here in the top 5. But this is really the first.
It's got to be Will Johnson. It's got to be an offensive tackle. I absolutely love the banter in the chat. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. The other thing too, we just talked about him. This could be Jalen Walker too. This could be a guy that that they put and just they figure out the fit later. Yes, they run a 3-4, so their linebackers stand up more. You've got Kayvon Thibodeau on the right side and Brian Burns on the left side, but then you bring in Jalen Walker and you throw him in the middle to replace either Micah McFadden or Bobby Ariki. Is that a possibility? Yes. I think ultimately, if I'm looking at it, it comes down to either Armand Membou or Tyler Warren. It's got to be one of those 2. But the third option is the Giants could be working the phone lines to try to get out of this 5th overall selection and scramble and recoup, which that would be another thing. And, Parker, he called it out in the chat, a double trade down and you take Jackson Dart in late round 1. But the question is, you got to find a dance partner who's willing to come up. Somebody could be coming up to get ahead of the Raiders for Ashton Jeanty. That's a possibility. Drew, if you're a team, if you're sitting there at 5 and the Giants, who are you on the phone with to try to make a move?
See, this is a tough one too, because you got to have a dance partner here. I don't know really, now that both quarterbacks are gone, both the blue chip guys are gone, who are you really trying to get up for right here? Is there maybe somebody, like you said, trying to jump for Jeanty? I don't really know if you can justify giving up draft capital to jump this high for a running back in a running back class this deep. Maybe a team that wants to grab Armand Membou. They don't feel great about the rest of these tackles. That could be a way. Did we mention Jalen Walker just straight up to the Giants right here? I don't know if we did mention that one. I know that we've already mentioned the edge room. But if they see him more as an inside linebacker, kind of a flex guy, we could see that going. Do we have a word from the producer here?
Yeah, producer's got the word. The pick is in with the 5th overall selection. The New York Giants select Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State.
Wow.
What a shock.
He's my 6th overall player on my big board, so it's a little bit high for me, but it's not. It's a best case scenario at this point if you don't want to go Ashton Jeanty and running back, which the Giants just don't. But I'm sure that Dable and Shane are probably kicking themselves for rolling the dice, thinking the Patriots would go offensive line. And now they have to walk away with Tyler Warren in an 88th overall selection. Drew, what do you think about Warren landing in New York here?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've seen the Jeremy Shockey connections. That's going to be fun for the fan base to really get kind of the heir to Jeremy Shockey staying in New York. I've personally been somebody who's been on the Colson Loveland tight end 1 train. I am somebody that's a little bit lower on Tyler Warren personally. And that's not to say he's a bad player. I still like him a lot as a player. I just love Colson Loveland that much. So if I was looking at a tight end in this range, that's probably where I would have gone. But you see this guy, the ceiling is incredibly high. He's a good athlete. You saw him basically the entire Penn State offense running straight through him. He's one of the best blockers in this tight end class. So flexible, can play that kind of H-back, or he can play inline tight end. He's got so much flexibility in that offense. He's a great chess piece for that offense in New York while they wait and try to get set up with a franchise quarterback somewhere else. And I think, with the talent on the board at this point, there were very few directions you could have gone. So if you could not get a dance partner to come up to 5 right here, I don't dislike this pick much at all.
And there's one other thing we need to point out. We've had back-to-back Colorado followed by back-to-back Penn State.
True.
I can't think of a draft where 3 schools dominated the top 5.
Right. The only way it gets even crazier is we get Elijah Arroyo here at 6 to the Raiders. That's how we completely go off the rails at that point. But speaking of which, the Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock now. Had obviously the offseason, get Pete Carroll as your head coach. You've got Geno Smith as your quarterback. It's Seattle, the Redux. So is this an Ashton Jeanty pick? Is he going to be the Marshawn Lynch in Vegas? Do they go wide receiver here? Is this Tetairoa McMillan? Is this Luther Burden? Do they go defensive tackle next to Christian Wilkins and go Mason Graham in the middle? Do they potentially look at edge opposite Max Crosby? I think it's got to be offense here. But Drew, what are you thinking for the Raiders here at pick 6?
Yeah, I've been somebody who's mocked Ashton Jeanty a lot in my recent ones there. That kind of just feels like the easy spot to plug that now. But, like we've seen a big change in the top 5 here. This is not at all how people expected this to fall. Mason Graham being here, Armand Membou making it out of the top 5. There's a couple different directions they go. They still need some help on that offensive line, and Membou continues to fall as far as he did. That's somewhere they could go for sure. I wouldn't rule Jeanty out by any means. This is a team that really just needs a place to start, and a franchise blue chip running back in Ashton Jeanty for a quarterback or a coach like Pete Carroll, who's old school like that, likes to run the ball. Like you mentioned, the Marshawn Lynch connection. That there's a lot of ways they could go with this pick. I think Will Johnson is another sleeper here. We already talked about him a couple picks earlier. That's a team that needs corner help. We talked about Jahdae Barron. If they see him as a pure nickel, if you see a nickel who's that good and you have a hole there, this could be a spot you take that early. I think there's probably 3 or 4 different directions they could go, and they're all good ones here. So I don't hate the position that they're in at all right now. I would be happy if I was Vegas.
Absolutely. And there's other positions. Obviously, Jalen Walker is another one that keeps getting thrown about. We talked about him at 4. You could throw him here at 6, play him at edge, but it looks like the pick is in with the 6th overall selection. The Las Vegas Raiders select Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State. So there it is. The top running back in this class, one of my few blue chip prospects in this class. And Pete Carroll says we are going to relive the Legion of Boom in Seattle and just run the ball 40 times a game. But Drew, how are you feeling about Jeanty here in Vegas?
Yeah, I'm somebody that is kind of gone kind of new school. I don't know that I love the idea of a running back in the top 10 ever, just from a pure value perspective. But if I were to take a running back in the top 10, Ashton Jeanty is the highest running back I've ever graded personally. I am super high on him. He's a top 5 player on my big board. I think Ashton Jeanty is a great place to start this kind of rebuild for Vegas. A guy you can really run the offense through. He can be your identity for the first few years. You've got a good enough offensive line built up to where you're not worried about kind of wasting him behind he's not going to have to get all of his yards after contact. They have a solid enough run blocking offensive line to build up, give him some lanes to work with. And this is a guy that can come in and be an immediate 1,500 plus yard rusher in the league, in my opinion.
No, 100%. He's my 4th overall player, so I'm with you in a top 5 aspect here at 6th. It's good value for the Raiders. It takes pressure off of Geno Smith trying to throw to Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker 30 times a game, which is just seems like coaching malpractice at this point. But it's a definitely good fit. It's with Pete Carroll there and Tom Brady as the minority owner, this team is going to be, hey, we need to get high impact players to win now. And Ashton Jeanty is probably one of the few talents that's going to help you do that. But the Jets on the clock here at 7th overall, a lot of ways they could go to. Obviously both quarterbacks off the board, that's an issue, but they could go wide receiver opposite Garrett Wilson. They could go corner opposite Sauce Gardner. They could go Armand Membou still here. They could go Membou at right tackle, and you've got Olu and Membou as your left and right tackle. But, Drew, where do you think the Jets are looking at here at pick 7?
Yeah, Bill, I think this is probably the team that's the happiest right now. If I was the New York Jets, I would be jumping up and down in that war room. This is falling about as good as they could ask for as far as the first 6 picks. To me, their 2 dream selections have been Armand Membou and Mason Graham. You have a hole at tackle, even though you got Olu Fashanu last year. You still have a hole at right tackle. Get that bookend tackle duo for the next 10 years, really lock that position down, one of the most important positions in football. But also Mason Graham, who everybody had kind of automatically considered a top 5 pick in this draft class. They have Quinnen Williams, but outside of that, there's really no pass rushing presence on that interior defensive line. They have no depth there past some big body run defenders. So that's a team that really desperately needs to address interior defensive line in this draft. And a guy who's, a top 5 player on my big board as well, and Mason Graham, who's got so much pass rushing juice at that interior. The size has been a concern, but he continues to flash just incredible speed and hand usage from the interior. I think between those 2 falling to 7 is just absolutely best case scenario for the Jets. I don't think you can go wrong either way, personally.
Absolutely. So I'll also throw this because you've been on the Colston Loveland tight end 1 train. The Jets need a tight end. Is this Colston Loveland? Would this be too high for you?
I would not dislike that pick at all. I've mentioned that before. It has not been received particularly well from Jets fans that I've mentioned that too. But if I'm the Jets GM, now in this case, I probably take Graham or Membou before that. But if the board had fallen where they're both gone, I don't have any problems at all taking Colston Loveland in the top 10. I think he's absolutely worthy of a 7th overall pick to a team that has that big a hole at tight end. I think his receiving ceiling is that high. He's a great separator, great athlete, much better inline blocker than people give him credit for. So there's so much talent at positions of need for the Jets right now. And I think their board is just following exactly how they want. But Bill, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah, so I would be okay with Colston Loveland here. It's a little high for me. He's my 28th overall prospect. There's a bit of a gap between him and Warren. But if you're wanting an offensive weapon to help support Justin Fields over the middle as a security blanket, Colston Loveland's about as good as it's going to get. If you want to get speed on the outside, you can go Matthew Golden here opposite Garrett Wilson, and you've got 2 killer weapons for Justin Fields. Corner, obviously, Will Johnson, like we talked about, there's some speed concerns, but he's still the 2nd best corner in this class going away. So that's another option. Jalen Walker, we continue to talk about him. This could be a Jalen Walker move. Aaron Glenn, creative defensive coordinator in Detroit, now the head coach at New York. He just feels like a Jet. He just feels like an Aaron Glenn type of guy. Yep. And Glenn will find multiple ways to deploy him. So that's where I would go. Obviously, the other conversational piece is, do we start to talk the QB3? Do we start to talk Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart? It'd be a little bit high for my blood, absolutely. But
Anthony Russo's making the pick, and I can say with confidence that I don't think it's going to be Dart.
Yeah, I don't think Anthony's going to go that high.
That's true, but we didn't think the Jags were going to trade up to 3 either, Jim.
That's true.
We don't know. Epic Mock 25, anything could happen. We could see Tyler Shuck here in the top 10 and the entire internet lose its mind.
I mean, at this point, we've seen so many shocks. I just go for the shock value at this point. It'd be a lot of fun. Just get one of these 3 QBs in the top 10. Why not?
Yeah, and the more you talk with people around the league, it's something that can definitely happen. When you look at the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Jets, the Saints, that's four teams right there in the top 10 that need quarterbacks that are a little bit rudderless in terms of, don't know really where they're going. So they could use 3 quarterbacks in the top 10, not out of the realm of possibility here. But the more I talk about it, the more I talk myself into Armand Membou at right tackle for the Jets or Matthew Golden at wide receiver, just to give him that speed factor. Ultimately, like you mentioned, Anthony Russo, the GM of the Jets, he's got the world is his oyster right now. He's probably got the pick on the card, but is so preoccupied doing backflips over how this board felt. He hasn't turned it quite in yet.
Yep.
But in other news, obviously in the NFL, while we wait for the pick, so obviously issue comes out with Isaiah Bond earlier today. He was in Frisco PD with a warrant for a sexual assault case.
Mm-hmm.
There had been rumors, character concerns. We'd all been waiting for that shoe to drop. Drew, how does that put him on your board right now?
I think we already kind of saw Isaiah Bond fall for a while. He started off in this conversation as he was my wide receiver 1 coming into the year. I know that was a common theme for a lot of people. And I think you saw the production fall off. There were injury issues. The character concerns have been floated out there. But now with this, he was already trending towards day 3. And with the legal issues on top of this, I kind of be surprised to see him go before day 3. And I think the question is, how far into day 3 does he fall now?
No, I agree with you. I had him as a round 4 prospect before these issues were out. And we talked about him the other night here on the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast when we talked about sleeper wide receivers for Buffalo and speedsters. I had a round 4 grade on him before these issues, and I just think it's going to push him down the board a little bit. So
we have a trade that we're going to announce right now.
Oh, wow.
It's a little bit later in the draft order, but the Minnesota Vikings have traded picks 24 and 97 to the Raiders for picks 37, 68, and 108. So the Raiders have traded back up into round 1 with Minnesota.
Really interesting. And I mean, I think that's the you have somebody, Bill?
I was going to say, the producer, we're doubling down here. It looks like there's another trade.
Oh my
Chicago
God.
is now on the clock. Jets trading out of 7. Chicago now on the clock here, according to the Jets GM. So, Drew, Chicago coming up. Is this Jalen Walker? Is this Shamar Stewart? Is this a pass rusher?
I mean, to me, it has to be. We've heard Marion
Mason Graham.
Around. It's Mason Graham. Wow, we have the pick in.
No, the pick isn't in. I'm saying,
I thought you were
who would the Bears? The Mason Graham to the Bears makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
and I don't know too many mocks that would have had Mason Graham falling to where people would have projected Chicago trade up. But this makes a lot of sense. Chicago has a lot of draft capital. So this makes a lot of sense to me.
And, Chicago's been in the trade talks. Do we have something else? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, you're good.
Okay.
100% agreed.
We've heard Chicago, get talked about, like Abdul Carter falling to 5 or even out of the top 5. Chicago was the biggest suitor to trade up for him. Chicago, they really need pass rush upside there. You got Montez Sweat as one of your starting guys. Austin Booker really didn't develop into the starting rotational piece you would have wanted from last year. This is a team that needs interior and edge help in the pass rush. So Mason Graham is fully on the board. I think Jalen Walker's in play here. Shamar Stewart. There's a lot of different ways they could go on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's where they have to go. We've seen them address the offensive line. And do we have the pick in now?
We don't have the pick in yet, but we have the capital move. So the Jets will receive picks 10, 39, 233, and a 2026 second round selection for Chicago to go to 7 and 42. So Chicago moving around the board a bit, but no, I think you're spot on here, Drew. When you look at Carolina and New Orleans, both of them have a need at edge rusher. Yep. So if you're going to jump those two teams, I feel like it's almost got to be for edge rusher. Mason Graham, he could have ended up in Carolina. I wouldn't have seen him in New Orleans, but Chicago has a lot of draft capital. Like we just saw, they just traded 10 and 39, and they walk away with 7 and 42. That gives them back-to-back picks in the second round at 41 and 42. So that's the kind of move you make. But we're not even out of the top 10, and we've already got 2 trades in this Epic Mock 25. Drew, did you foresee this much movement on the board early?
Absolutely not. I mean, I knew, coming up to this, we've had so many weeks to prepare for this draft. There's been a lot of trade talks. I knew draft professors were getting ready to move. People don't want to stick where they are in this draft class. But I really was not expecting there to be this much of a market for trade ups this far into the top 10. This is pure chaos at this point. And we haven't even gotten a chance to talk about the Raiders trade because the Chicago trade came in right after. Right. So I love the move for both the Jets and Chicago. Like you said, Chicago jumping up ahead of two needy teams at edge. The Jets picking up stuff to move back, getting extra capital. They didn't see anybody they loved. Is the pick in? Do we have it?
The pick is in. So it is Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. I like the fit, but I don't know if trading up to 7 for Graham was the right move. I would have stayed put because I would have assumed that the Panthers and the Saints would have went edge, and then you get him at 10 anyway. But, we just saw the Giants thought they would trade down and end up with Abdul Carter, and look how that ended for them. They walk away with Tyler Warren. Drew, how do you feel about Mason Graham here going to Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 5 player on my board, so I like the value. I fully agree with your point where I think I'm not sure the two teams ahead of you were threats to take Mason Graham off the board. And I think if you knew the Jets were looking to trade out already, it's clear they didn't want to make that pick. So I think you could have gotten him at 10. But if you think he's your guy, if you think he's going to have that massive franchise-changing impact on the interior defensive line that we think he can, I love that pick. I think it kind of takes some of the pressure off that edge room that's maybe not the strongest. And I think he just bolsters that defensive line so much for a team that's really worked on the offensive side of the ball recently. They fixed their offensive line. They've got Mykel Williams, some weapons. You've got Ben Johnson in there to be the offensive genius. You've really kind of solidified the offensive side of the ball. It's now time to work on the defense, and I think this is a great first move to make to build up that defense.
100%, and I agree with you. And the good news is they did sign Grady Jarrett in the offseason to a short-term deal, so you can bring Mason Graham along slowly. But looks like the comments go time Dolphins.
Let's talk about the trade. So I see some people saying bad trade, some people saying good trade. Here's my take, right? So if we look at the 7 players that have been picked, arguably they are 6 of the 7 best players in the draft. Just based upon listening to how consensus has them graded, whether it's Bill, Drew, whoever, I think the only player that isn't in that group is Shedeur Sanders, right? Mm-hmm. Right, but 6 of the top 7 players that have been drafted would be arguably the highest graded players, the blue chippers of the draft class. So if you're Ryan Poles, you got to go up and you got to get your guy. You have to be aggressive. You have to get your guy. And I don't think Mason Graham is dropping to 10. Like you guys were coming up with scenarios. The Jets probably would have taken Mason Graham, but the Jets probably prefer to have more draft picks because they have a new GM. More picks is important as opposed to blue chips. So you got to trade down, address a lot of needs. So, I can see how somebody's saying it's a bad trade, but the Bears coming up and getting Mason Graham, he's one of the blue chips in the draft class. I don't know that it's ever a bad trade to go up and get one of the blue chips. But what do you guys think as far as the quality of the trade?
I think the quality of the trade, the fact is that, you swap 10, 39, a 7th rounder and a 2nd rounder next year for 7 and 42. So realistically, you're giving up a 2nd round pick next year to kind of move about the board. It's a really good trade. Ryan Poles made an excellent move here. I'm just of the thought that if I'm going to move up and I'm going to leapfrog a couple of teams, I'd rather it be for an edge rusher. I'd rather it be for a pass rusher that can get after the quarterback. Mason Graham certainly can rush the passer, but that's not his specialty. He's more of a gap filler at defensive tackle. So that's where I would say it's not a bad trade. It's just not the trade that I would have made. But Drew, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's just what we were touching on earlier, where in theory, I like the trade. I think Jim, you made some great points there. I don't think the two teams like the Panthers and the Saints were really threats to take him. I think that was going to be edge. If the Jets were content taking him at 7, that makes a lot more sense. To me, I think when you see them get ready to move out, it kind of indicates they don't really want to make that selection, and you can kind of risk it a little bit. I would have just saved my draft capital and used the rest of it to really bolster that defense and set up a team around Mykel Williams, like I was saying earlier. But like you said, Jim, I mean, going up to get a guy that's in almost everybody's top 5, just that high consensus of a player, I don't think you can really go wrong getting him at 7 right there. That's great value whether you trade up or not. So I still like the decision overall.
And I think a couple of other things, like as I look at like the draft from a macro perspective, I think seeing the trades in the top 10, while very few of us predicted this really makes sense. We don't see a team coming way up. These are teams that are moving up 2 or 3 spots. So my opinion is you'll see maybe a little bit of movement like this for people to go up and get their guy, but they're going to move up 2 spots. Whereas like some of the people like at 15, I know like Scott, you wanted somebody to come way up to 15 to come get Atlanta's pick. Moving 10 spots up, I don't think this is the draft class to move 10 spots up. But moving 2 or 3, especially in the top 10 to make sure you get your guy. And like I said, I think the first 7 players that are picked, I'm not surprised at the players that are off the board. I'm only surprised as to the teams that landed them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you just look at on the draft value chart using the Hill draft value chart, going from pick 3 to pick 5, it's about 50 points, which is the equivalent of a late 3rd round. So it's not much to move that far. Whereas if you're going from say 3 to 13, that's about 180 points, which is the equivalent of an early 2nd, late 1st. So you're immediately having to push more capital into it.
Yep. Randall also brings up a good point about trading up to get Mason Graham.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to fall to 10 because I think had he fallen past the Jets at 7, somebody's going to trade up to Carolina's spot to get him, or somebody's going to trade up to the Saints spot to get him. I know that the Saints want more picks definitively. So from my standpoint, Mason Graham going 7th overall should not surprise anybody. Like I said, the only surprise is which team got him there. But Mason Graham going at 7th overall shouldn't be the story. The story is you go up and you get your guy. And to Randall's point, you're worried that if you don't wait for the player to drop because somebody could jump you to get it. So
yeah.
Completely fair. So Carolina on the clock here at 8, and you know, obviously when you look at Carolina, edge rusher is the need of the day, you know, and there's a multitude.
The pick is in.
The pick is in.
It's
and
Jihaad Campbell.
Wow. So
that's
Jihaad Campbell. Yeah, that's a shock for me. Go ahead, Drew.
Is that the biggest shock? Is that the biggest shock of the draft for you so far, Bill?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I have Jihaad Campbell as the 20th overall prospect on my board. So to take him here, it's a little bit high. But the concern is, how do you feel about that labrum issue and whether he's going to be ready to roll for camp or not? By all accounts, he should be ready to go. He is, you know, my linebacker 1 prospect, 1A, 1B with Jalen Walker, depending on how you classify Jalen Walker. So for me, it's a little high. I would have seen him probably in the 10 to 20 range. I don't fault Carolina for getting a man in the middle. It's just a little bit high for me. But Drew, how do you feel about the Jihaad Campbell selection here?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the labrum thing is a huge issue in the top 10. You know, you have a guy who's coming off a major shoulder injury. You expect him to be back for week 1, maybe by camp, depending on how the recovery goes. But I believe he also has a lingering knee issue. He's got a lower body issue that is also lingered that teams are slightly worried about. And I'm somebody like Jihaad Campbell's floating around my top 10 on my board. Like I really like him as a player. But for a team like Carolina, that while they do have a needed inside linebacker, you know, we've seen the NFL devalue that position. That's clearly not a position that the NFL values at the level of edge rusher or just pass rusher in general, which Carolina needs so badly. And you have a guy like Jalen Walker, who they've been tied to a lot. There's been a lot of smoke around that. You have a guy like Shamar Stewart on the board with that kind of ceiling and that run defense that Carolina needs. I think either one of those 2 picks would have been home runs, and I think Jihaad Campbell's going to be a great player. I just, with the talent on the board and the positions that Carolina needs, I'm not sure that I would have taken him over some of the other guys on the board.
Yeah, and I'll call one thing out too. We're here at pick number 9 with the Saints right now, and this class was always talked about and hyped up as a premier edge rusher class. But by my math, there's only been 1 edge rusher going off the board in these first 8 picks. Drew, does that surprise you at all?
That shocks me. And again, I think it depends on what do you classify Jalen Walker as an edge or not. I do personally. So for me, like I would not have been surprised to see both Jalen Walker and Shamar Stewart off the board by now. So like you mentioned, people talk so highly of this edge class. To see this board fall like it has so far through these first 8 picks, this has been really surprising to me. Bill, has it fallen for you?
Yeah, so it's very surprising for me. I have guys like, obviously, Jihaad Campbell. I talked about, he's my 20th overall player. Tyler Warren in the top 5, a little bit high for me. But the fact is that we've only had one edge rusher go, and it's Abdul Carter. When you have guys like Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, Nick Scourton, pure talent guys, pure athletic guys, Shamar Stewart, pure talent guys, James Pierce Jr., Mike Green. It was hailed as an edge class that had talent dripping all over it, but we've only had one go in the top 9.
Bill, I think a good thing to point out about a couple of the guys that you mentioned, so like Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart specifically, they're polarizing, right? So your gold is somebody else's, like, scraps they're putting on the compost pile, right? Not everybody wants the Mykel Williams style of edge. You have him graded that high. You have Shamar Stewart that high. And I mean, you and I have been talking about this on podcasts for close to 6 months. But this is where, there's a lot of you watching. So thank you for everybody watching. There's almost 1,000 of you right now. When you're looking at a board for your favorite draft simulator and one has Shamar Stewart in the top 10, I know from talking with multiple draft professors that Shamar Stewart is not a consensus top 20 player. Like, I know, Scott, where are you? Yeah, so Scott right here, if Shamar Stewart goes to his team and his team needs an edge, he's not a fan of that pick. He's hoping somebody else takes Shamar Stewart so he doesn't have to make the decision. And Scott's not going to make that decision, right? And for every person that says, like Bill, they have Shamar Stewart that high, I can probably find one other person like Scott that doesn't want him. Now, if he falls to Buffalo, like, I would jump up and down. But right. I think that, one of the conversations we should have is where do you think Shamar Stewart falls, like between 9 and 32? Like, how far do you guys think he's going to tumble?
Drew, I'll let you field that one first.
Yeah, for me, and again, this is coming from a perspective of somebody who's high on Shamar Stewart. It's going to be interesting to see how Bill falls because I know he's a little bit lower. There's so many edge and like that 5-tech guy that can kick inside to 3-tech on passing downs, needy teams in that teen stretch. Like you've got Arizona, and we already mentioned Falcons who have that need. I know they won't make that pick in this mock because we know how Scott feels about Shamar. The Bengals at 17 are another team he would fit extremely well on that defense. They really need help on the defensive side of the ball. But there's so many teams in that mid to late teen stretch of this draft that need help at the position that Shamar Stewart plays. I have a hard time seeing him slip into the 20s. But with how much chaos we've had so far, I would not rule anything out at this point.
Yeah, and Shamar Stewart is my edge number 7 and my 33rd overall player. So would it shock me to see him fall all the way to 32 to Philadelphia? Absolutely not. But you look at some of the teams coming up, obviously the Saints, the 49ers could use pass rush. Dallas could use some. Dolphins, even the Colts, they took Latu last year, but they wouldn't hurt him to take another guy like Shamar Stewart. Cincinnati's probably my big spot at 17 that I'd circle for Shamar.
So I don't know that Parker Blake is that high in Shamar based upon how I understand how he grades. But I think Shamar Stewart has a really high RAS score. Yep. So to me, if he drops past Indianapolis, the next team I would ask is, would he drop past Green Bay? Because both teams have very similar guardrails to how they draft. That Shamar Stewart, for as polarizing as he is, does fit the profile of teams that would draft a player like him. And with especially like Tyler Warren's off the board, and that was one of the most popular picks to go to the Colts. So like Robin, or I said Robin, that's his Twitter. So Jay, who is drafting for the Colts, so that's Jay Robbins, I would be curious how he is stacking the board right now because his primary target went off the board in the top 5. So, and he was expecting the player that went 5th overall to drop to the Colts at 14, and that's just good luck. So,
and looks like the pick is in. New Orleans Saints go Will Johnson, corner out of Michigan. I know they called it out in the comments about Will Johnson to the Saints here. Traded away Lattimore, lost to Debo in free agency. So I like this pick here. Definite good pick here. The concern with long speed and where he's at with his injury with his turf toe is kind of the big concern. But before we get your thoughts on that, Drew, it looks like the next pick is in the New York Jets.
Line in now. Yep, there it is.
Armand Membou with Missouri. So Jets get a guy that could have got at 7, falls here to 10. Yep. Drew, how do you feel about the Saints and the Jets picks here at 9 and 10, respectively?
The Saints, this is a team that they took Kool-Aid and Kinstry in the second round last year, starting to build up. They lost Paulson Adebo in free agency, so that secondary is kind of in flux right now, a little bit questionable. So I think as far as boundary corners go, I know that Will Johnson is the kind of consensus second guy there. The injury concerns and the top end athleticism worries me a little bit. I'm not sure I would have taken him in the top 10, but it's a position of need for the Saints. So I don't hate the fit one bit. But the Jets pick is really the home run here to me. I would have taken Armand Membou at 7, no questions asked. And our good buddy of the draft professors, Anthony Russo, trading back to 10, getting extra draft capital on day 2, high draft capital on day 2, and still getting the number 1 overall off the tackle on pretty much everybody's board. And Armand Membou at 10 here is an absolute home run. And I think value-wise, that's pretty easily the best pick of this draft so far to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You get a guy that could have went as high as 4 overall here at 10. And not only that, but you trade down and you get him. I think right now the Jets are probably the front runner for GM of the night, the way they've maneuvered this board. And I'm sure I'm sure Jim's, cursing me in AFC East language right now for saying that, but it's really good. You get a right tackle to play off of Olu Fashanu at the left tackle to project Justin Fields. But not only that, you get an additional second round selection next year. You trade up 3 more picks in round 2. So you move up a little bit more in case you need to get back into round 1 for a quarterback because you're not sold on Justin Fields entirely. So the Jets kind of making some moves.
Yep. And Clint Ghost, another draft professor, is agreeing with you there, Bill. So definitely Fashanu and Membou, I like it. I like what the Jets are doing. So, Anthony, I know that you are listening to me. I think you're on the Bears podcast, if I understood that right. Anthony, definitely impressed with what you're doing too.
Yeah, absolutely. So 49ers on the clock here at number 11 overall.
Okay.
And
Will wanted to add in good luck protecting them.
I'm sure
always count on Will for one of those.
Yeah, he and Bears fans are all in agreement with that statement. They just print that on a shirt and just wear it. But 49ers on the clock here at 11. They are a very weird team because you think they'd be better than a top 11 selection, with the talent they have, but kind of fell off a little bit with injuries. Obviously, there's the whole black cloud of, are they going to pay Brock Purdy? Are they not? Are they going to franchise tag him? What's that look like? Drew, if you're the 49ers GM here, where are you going at 11?
Yeah, I think Clint nails one of the options. I think Will Campbell is a strong option for them. They need offensive line help. With Trent Williams, questionable right there, his future, how long he's going to be on that team. You have a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball as well. Like I've mocked Darren Harmon at 11 a couple of times. That's a team that needs interior defensive line help a good bit. I think Jahdae Barron could be in question right here too. It's a team that needs secondary help. He's the number 1 nickel on the board to me. I would take him this high. I think Jalen Walker still being on the board is a very strong option for San Francisco. He would fit extremely well in that defense. They could play him at both edge and inside linebacker, kind of that defensive flex that he played in college. Kenneth Grant is another option for a team that needs interior defensive line help. There's a lot of directions that could go on defense.
So let's stack something here for a little bit because this is a great exercise if people aren't familiar with boards. So 49ers need defensive tackle. Bill, who are your top 4 defensive tackles left?
My top 4 defensive tackles would be Alfred Collins, Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, and Riley Mills in that order. And there's a steep drop off. I won't say steep, but there's a tier break after Kenneth Grant down into Riley Mills.
Drew, who are your 4 best defensive tackles that are available here?
So for me, it's Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Alfred Collins, and then Tyleik Williams. And I think there's a pretty steep drop off after Harmon and then after Grant again for me. That's how my board falls.
Okay, so Drew, who are your 3 best corners that are available here?
Now again, I think it's important to differentiate because I use nickel and outside DB differently on my boards. So if we're talking about just DB in general, it would be Jahdae Barron right here. If you count him as a corner, I think this is the range you take him in. But as far as boundary corners go, I think you've got Azareye'h Thomas in this range, who I'm a lot higher on than most people. I would take him in this range. You've got like Maxwell Hairston has been floated in the first round a lot. And I think I should have my board pulled up right here on me. But we'll count Jahdae Barron as a corner just overall for that right now.
Bill, what corners do you like in this range?
So the first one that I like in this range, obviously, it's predicated on his health being 100%, but Ben Morrison from Notre Dame. If he's healthy like he was in 2023, this is a top 5 corner and a top 5 player in the class, hands down, going away. After that, Jahdae Barron, like we talked about a little bit, like Drew had mentioned, kind of a nickel corner, but can play some boundary as well. And then Savone Revel from ECU, again, another corner with injury questions at the ACL spot. So you kind of wonder if he's going to be healthy. But those would be my top 3 if I'm looking at it right now. And
then, so just for the audience listening, if this is the first time you've ever watched this channel, I have a lot of respect for both Drew and Bill's boards, and I think they only had one corner that overlapped that they would take at 11th overall. And that is let's say that's going to be the art of this draft. Because if I were now to ask best offensive tackles that the 49ers could take here, Bill, what does your offensive tackle board look like?
So if you're looking offensive tackle, the best one, obviously, Jonas Avenea from Arizona, but he's going to be a right tackle. Josh Simmons from Ohio State, a left tackle, and then Ariante Ursary, a left tackle after that. I have Will Campbell graded as a guard, but he would be above all of those players just stacking offensive linemen together.
Okay. Yeah, and for me, in that same vein, I also have Will Campbell as a guard, but I do have him a lot lower than that. I would not necessarily take Will Campbell in this range. For pure offensive tackle, for me, it's Josh Simmons. I would be super comfortable taking him in this range. I love Josh Simmons. There's some character concerns that have been floated there. I think the knee is ahead of recovery, so I don't know if the injury is quite as scary as it's been made out to be so far. But there's some off-the-field concerns with him. I'd have Josh Connerly, next after that. I'm a huge fan of his game, and Anthony Belton out of NC State would be my third after that. So yeah, there's the offensive line options are not super diverse this high in the draft after Armand Membou has gone off the board, but there's some guys I really like in this class.
And I'll throw this out too. It's probably a little bit kind of high for this, but are we ruling out wide receiver here? Obviously, you have Pearsall and you have Ayuk, but you just lost Debo. You want to try to get cheaper. Maybe you can move off of Ayuk in a year. Questions about the ACL. A guy who's really shifty, also a Missouri. So let's go back-to-back schools again. Luther Burden III. You want a speedster. Matthew Golden's here. I don't think the 49ers would go wide receiver, but it's got to be a question they're asking, right, Drew?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think you rule it out completely. I think it would have been a very, very dependent on what they did with Ayuk this offseason. Brandon Ayuk, there were a lot of trade talks with him. I believe Cleveland was involved in those, if I'm remembering that correctly.
You are correct. Yeah.
And so I think if you move him, it becomes a much more strong possibility here at 11. And I think if they were to make this pick here, that's probably indicative of maybe Ayuk getting moved in this mock. But I think that's probably a little bit lower on their priority list with how big holes there is on the offensive line and how much help that defensive side of the ball needs. So I think that's probably a little bit lower on the list, but I'm not sure I'd completely rule it out for sure.
Yeah. Ooh, excuse me. So as we wait for the 49ers pick to come in, we look down the board: Dallas, Miami, Indianapolis. Drew, and actually, please hold. Yep, the pick is in, so it looks like the San Francisco 49ers select Mike Green, the edge from Marshall. Drew, how do you feel about that one, sir?
That's really interesting. I mean, Bill, did you expect Mike Green to be the second edge off the board? Not to immediately bounce back to you, but
yeah. So he was my 4th overall graded edge, but obviously the character concerns could have pushed him down into the late first round. I still see him in the top 32, but I'm with you. It seems a little high, but if you're talking pure talent, I'm okay with this pick here. It's how do you feel about the off the field stuff? He's also a little bit undersized. So what are you getting as far as a run setter in the edge? But I definitely talent wise by itself, definitely a great selection here. But how do you feel about those off the field concerns? And clearly the 49ers, they say, hey, the talent outweighs that. And you can kind of see that with some GMs. They're going to say, hey, this talent's going to outweigh that. And they're going to go higher. But Drew, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm a huge Mike Green guy. I grade purely based off the tape. I'm not going to factor in the off-the-field concerns in my grade, so I still have him as a first-round grade. I think this is something the team has to vet out. If you feel comfortable taking a shot on those off-field concerns, I don't have any problems with him in this range, just on a pure film and talent perspective. Probably has the deepest pass rushing bag of any edge rusher in this class. If you ask me, he uses so many moves effectively. He's got a dangerous outside spin, which you don't see too often either. He's got really nice bend. He's a great athlete. He had an awesome Senior Bowl week. I think he's an extremely talented edge. I think, like we said, he's kind of undersized, not the best anchor in run defense, but he's a guy that can really, really shed blocks. He's got a great stack and shed. I think he's a great job at avoiding blocks and can set that edge, even while being a little bit undersized. I think he has potential to be a 3-down edge in the NFL. And while I probably would have addressed interior for the Niners first, I don't think Mike Green's a bad pick at all in the slice.
No, 100%. I completely agree. So Dallas is on the clock here. And when I'm looking at Dallas, I'm thinking two positions. I'm thinking running back, or I'm thinking wide receiver. Obviously, is this Omarion Hampton, or is this Matthew Golden? I'd lean probably more towards Golden, maybe even Tetairoa McMillan, depending on how you grade them out. Obviously, my top wide receiver is Luther Burden, but not everybody feels that way. Drew, if you're in Jerry Jones's ear, what are you telling him?
Yeah, I fully agree with you on the playmaker front. I think this is you got to add some juice with Jihaad Campbell. I think he's the only guy that kind of gets you off of that. With Jihaad Campbell being off the board, I think it has to be a skill position. And I am one of the few still left on the Luther Burden wide receiver 1 train with you, Bill. He has remained my wide receiver 1 throughout this whole process. I think that's very similar to Mike Green, where if you have your team, your investigative workers, vet them out, talk to the family, friends. If you feel good about the character concerns, if you don't think they're an issue, I think talent-wise, you take Luther Burden here. Absolutely, you do. Omarion Hampton is another guy that's in the running. Absolutely. As the second running back, he's been talked about in this range a lot. Teams, even with how deep this running back class is, teams feel like there's a big gap after Omarion Hampton from what I know. So I think that's a guy that's absolutely in play. I think, like you said, Matthew Golden. I think Emeka Egbuka is a sleeper pick to go this high. I think from what I know, the NFL is absolutely in love with him. He's so cerebral. He's aced the interview process. He's been amazing on the whiteboard. Mentally, he's got the mindset of like a 30-year vet. Teams are just in love with this guy. So I think there's kind of a revolving door with who that first receiver off the board is, depending on whether or not you count Travis Hunter as a receiver. So I think you could really go, one of four different ways. Any of those receivers could be the next one off the board after that. I think Matthew Golden is probably the most likely for the Cowboys, from what I know. But yeah, like you said, it could go anywhere, and I think Omarion Hampton's in that mix as well.
I think Jalen Walker's in play here. We haven't seen Walker go off the board, right? So Dallas, I believe, needs an off-ball linebacker. I think defensive tackle for Dallas could be, depending upon how high you value Harmon or Grant, or maybe even Tyleek or Alfred Collins. Right? I think those guys, because some of this should be, you got to focus on your board, right? Do you guys have any players that are in your top 12 that haven't been taken yet? And like Bill, I know that you have Luther Burden, right?
Yeah, so I still have a couple, and one position that you didn't hit on that I'll mention here is edge, because I have Nick Scourton in my top 12. I have Luther Burden, Xavier Watts, Matthew Golden is my 12th overall player. So definitely guys in my top 12. I think it has to be offense, but that edge, the fact that the edges have kind of slid a little bit, is really making it hard on Jerry Jones if you're going.
Where do you guys have Pierce? So Joe has a comment in there. Where do you guys have Pierce? Like, it wouldn't surprise me to see Pierce fall to day 3. Sorry about that, Joe. But I don't want a player that takes plays off or is not coachable. So I don't care what kind of talent or athletic ability you have. If you're not going to be part of the team, I don't want you. So it doesn't surprise me that Pierce hasn't been taken, and I would be surprised if we call his name today.
Yep. And so before I break into that one, it looks like the pick is in with the 12th overall selection. Dallas Cowboys select Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. So getting a big body guy to go opposite of CeeDee Lamb. We'll come back to that here in a second. But I have Pierce, if you're talking just solely talent-wise, he's my 3rd overall edge with a first-round grade. You factor in the character concerns, the coachability concerns, the smoke and fire that's been around him, since back to the combine about those issues. It pushes him down, and I could certainly see Mike Green. I could certainly see Scourton, Williams, Armand Membou, Stewart, even Donovan Ezieruaku going before James Pierce Jr. In addition to that, the Dallas Cowboys taking Tetairoa McMillan here, giving a weapon opposite CeeDee Lamb for Dak Prescott to throw to, giving him every option available to turn this Dallas offense around. Drew, I'll kick it to you. Let's start with James Pierce and then move into Tetairoa McMillan.
Yeah, quickly on the James Pierce thing. First of all, love to see my guy Joe in here, fellow Titans fan. I always see him in the other Titans shows. A fellow chatter in there. Love to see him in here. And James Pierce, he's my 6th overall edge. I have an early 2nd round grade on him. I really do like James Pierce as a player. I think I fully agree with what Jim was saying about how far he falls, though. The NFL is really, really scared of these character concerns. They really just see him as an uncoachable player. Like you said, there's a lot of locker room issues. I just worry about I don't know that he falls to day 3. I think talent is too good to fall that far, but I would not be surprised to see him slip out of the top 50 in this mock at all. And on to the Tetairoa McMillan selection. I'm somebody that's kind of been a lot lower on Tet. I have a 2nd round grade on him as well. I'm not sure I would have taken him quite this high, but if you need that big body receiver like Dallas does to pair with CeeDee Lamb, like you mentioned, he's a guy that really does a great job of playing basketball at the catch point. He knows how to box guys out with that big frame, has those super long arms. The hand variance is great. He knows how and when to extend and hands catch and when to have soft hands and flashes them late at the catch point.
So Drew, if you're Field Yates, does that make like the older person in the room like Bill Mel Kiper?
I think it has to. Are you okay with that comment,
Bill? Drew, there's a guy. Here's a guy. Now here's a guy. No, I'm kidding. Back. We like to have fun here at the Draft Professor, folks. We love having fun here.
Cool.
But yeah. Go ahead, Drew.
Oh, yeah, just to finish up what I was saying about Tet. I am somebody, I think he probably fits better at big slot than he does maybe an X receiver that most people have kind of penciled him in as, regardless of that big frame. I don't know that he handles press coverage as well as I would like a guy to, especially when you're taken in this range. I worry about the top end athleticism if he really has the vertical speed to vertically challenge these boundary guys. But this is a guy that could really excel in the slot role.
Telegraphing everybody their picks. Sorry, I got to interrupt. So my guess is that Indianapolis is picking Ezieruaku, even though they're not on the clock.
I did see that get typed in there. Was that not?
Yes. Yes. So that's funny. So Jay, if that's you that's typing that in, that made me laugh. So thank you. But Miami's on the clock.
Ooh, and Bill, I'd love to pitch this to you. Do you think Tyreek Hill? Do you think we see him get moved in this mock?
With all the concerns surrounding him, if Miami were to move him, it is a sunk cost, like a day 3 pick or an early, day 2 pick in 2026. But you're not going to get nearly the value you would have had you moved him a month ago. The question is obviously, where does Miami go from here? And based on what we're seeing and what we're hearing, it sounds like the pick is in.
Oh yeah, the pick was in, and apparently the spreadsheet didn't get updated. So
and it looks like next 2 picks are in. Okay.
Yeah, next 2 picks are in, and it looks like Will Campbell from LSU is going to be the Miami Dolphins pick, and then the Indianapolis Colts taking Donovan Ezieruaku from Boston College. So Drew, love the Campbell pick. I'm not sold on him as a tackle, but it's a definite guard. Great selection there. And then Ezieruaku, just a athletic nightmare as an edge rusher. How do you feel about the Dolphins and the Colts' next 2 picks here?
Yeah, the Dolphins, I'm somebody that's been a little bit lower on Will Campbell, but I know the NFL as a whole is a lot higher on him than I am. I agree with you with him being a guard. I think he has to kick inside. I'm not sure I'd try him at tackle first. I think you just immediately plug him into the inside there. But I think he's incredibly technically sound. He's NFL ready. I have issues about the athleticism and maybe some of the power in places, but I think he's incredibly technically sound. The hands are great. The punch is strong. He's got vice grips for hands. So for a guy or a team like the Dolphins that needs interior offensive line help like they do, I think that's an awesome pick to see a guy who's been talked about as high as he has fall to 13. That fills an immediate need for them. And Donovan Ezieruaku, I hate to see this for the Colts, being a Titans fan. I don't want to see this guy in the division twice a year, but Donovan Ezieruaku is awesome. I love this guy. I'm so glad to see him get the love, getting taken this high. He is my edge 4 overall. I love Donovan Ezieruaku, easy mid-first round grade for me. He is the best bend in this class, in my opinion. He gets about as close to running horizontally as a human can get. He's that I call it motorcycle bend right around the corner to mention some of the Titans creators that have kind of copied that one. It bends like the motorcycle riders do around the corner. He gets so low to the ground. He's got awesome hands in run defense. He has the super long arms, 35, 34-inch arms, whatever he has. Amazing in run defense. He's got a sneaky good speed to power that doesn't get talked about a lot. He's got an awesome cross chop, one of the best in this class. I think he has one of the highest ceilings of the edge group here, and I love this pick for Indianapolis. How do you feel about him, Bill?
No, I think it's a great pick for when you're talking about edge rushers. Obviously, there was the Shamar Stewart, the Indianapolis RAS Colts that we always talk about with a high RAS score, but when you compare Ezieruaku to Shamar Stewart, Ezieruaku has better bend, like you mentioned, more production. Shamar Stewart's a little bit further off. So while it may be high for some, I'm all for it here. If he fits their board, he fits what they need. He right now ranks as my 8th overall edge, which you may think sounds far down the board, but that's 37th overall on my big board. So if he's their top guy, you go up. We talked about it earlier in the show. You go up and you get him, and I think that's just a great fit for them. But Atlanta's on the clock here now, and there's been a lot of smoke around Atlanta trading down, trying to find a move, or do they stick and pick? Drew, if you're Scott and you're running the Falcons here, where are you going?
Yeah, no, I don't know that Scott quite agrees. I don't think he has him this high, but Jalen Walker is a guy that has continued to slip. He's 6th on my big board overall. I'm really high on Jalen Walker. I would have had him gone already. He's a Georgia kid. You get him to stay in state, head to Atlanta to play for them. They have, I know Caden Ellis plays a very similar role, so there might be a little bit redundant, but a guy that has the pass rushing talent that he has, can you let him fall any further? I think Malaki Starks, another Georgia guy, has been talked about. Maybe you prefer him in a trade back, but you could get him right here. I don't know if you love taking a safety this early, but he's an incredibly talented safety, got the hometown connection. I think, Jihaad Campbell falling here would have been the best case, but we saw him go a lot earlier than we thought. Shamar Stewart could be in play if it wasn't Scott drafting for most other Falcons fans, but we know Scott is a lot lower on him overall. And we've had the edge board get shaken up a lot. We can see him fall even further than 15 at this point.
Right. No, 100% agreed. I think, looks like the pick is in, and the Atlanta Falcons select Mykel Williams, the edge from Georgia. I like that pick. I think it's a very good pick especially when you talk about where Mykel can go. He's one of the youngest edges in this class and has the ability to develop. They keep the hometown kid in state. Definitely a good selection here. Drew, how do you feel about this Falcons pick?
Yeah, for sure. I the one Georgia kid I didn't mention. But Mykel, staying in state, like you said, mentioned super young, such a high ceiling, great athlete. He was dealing with an ankle injury all throughout 2024, so you kind of saw a little bit of lack of explosiveness over that tape, but it was pretty explained. 2023 was much quicker, much more of an explosive player without that ankle injury. But he's such a good run defender, one of the best in the class, right there up with Shamar Stewart, in my opinion, as an edge rusher. Does a great job setting the edge, super long arms, knows how to use them, very active hands in run defense. Very, very raw as a pass rusher, doesn't really have any idea what he's doing with his hands, needs to develop a little bit of pass rushing plan, get kind of a go-to move with his hands, but incredibly powerful, very high athletic ceiling, great run defender. I love the fit for Atlanta.
Completely agree. So Cardinals on the clock now, and Cardinals have been one of those kind of, I won't say difficult teams to predict, but they're kind of a little bit off the beaten path. You could look at defensive tackle. We talked about Derek Harmon. We talked about Kenneth Grant. You could look at offensive linemen. Some people like Kelvin Banks as a guard here. Some people could, see an offensive tackle here on the right side, maybe a Josh Simmons, a Ariante Ursary. Drew, if you're Arizona, where are you looking here?
Yeah, I'm somebody that's a lot higher on Derek Harmon than most. I love the Derek Harmon fit in Arizona. They have a need for inside D-line help, and I think you could immediately go in there and add some juice to that pass rushing room, be a really high-ceiling pass rusher. I think you could also go edge here. You've seen Shamar Stewart fall. Shamar Stewart is a great fit in this defense as well. They could get a guy that can play that run defense, 5-tech on early downs, would be a pass rusher on third downs. I think he'd fit with that athletic ceiling. He continues to fall further than we expected him to. Jalen Walker is still here. We saw them take Hassan Reddick a couple years ago, who's been the comp for Jalen Walker for a while, that kind of hybrid linebacker who's really, really great athlete. You see him go to move down to full-time edge rusher in the NFL. Does Arizona do it again? We saw them take Isaiah Simmons, another hybrid guy, a couple years ago. What are you feeling, Bill?
Yeah, no, I think one sneaky pick that I will throw out there is wide receiver and Matthew Golden, because you have Marvin Harrison, the big body, on the left side. If you get Matthew Golden on the right side, this is a team, they've got to find out what they have in Kyler Murray. It's a crap or get off the pot type of scenario in Arizona. So yes, there's conversations of, do you go back-to-back wide receivers in round one in back-to-back years? But I think if you want to give Kyler every chance to succeed, you have to give him an offensive weapon. You could look at the trenches, a Kelvin Banks. I'm not nearly as high on him as some folks are, but Dane Brugler just announced he was his number 2 overall guard on the Beast, which, folks, if you're draft fanatics like we are, make sure you go check out Dane Brugler's work on the Beast. It's our Christmas every year when we talk about it. But I think there's a lot of things that Arizona can do here. I mean, they could even slide back, depending on what sort of offers they get.
And Bill, I do believe we have the pick in right here. It is going to be Jahdae Barron, the DB out of Texas.
Wow. Yes. Go ahead. Drew, I'll let you fill that. Yeah.
We've been just talking about the front seven right here. You mentioned receiver, which is also a great shout for them. They don't have anybody opposite of Marvin Harrison, but they opt to go secondary here. And I think value wise, Jahdae Barron is a great player. I think they have a pretty strong secondary, but you've seen a hole in that nickel spot. And I think Jahdae Barron is a guy that can come in. He's such a cerebral player, great football mind. The NFL was incredibly high on him as well. He aced the interview process. And this is a guy that come in and be, a borderline all-pro nickel corner, in my opinion, immediately into the league. So the front seven continues to be a question mark for Arizona. I don't think you can really go wrong with Jahdae Barron in this range.
No, 100% agree. For me, Jahdae Barron right now currently sits at my 29th overall player. Sits as my number 4 corner, the best nickel corner in this class. And my concerns are, can you put him on the outside in the boundary? Is that size going to allow for that? So that's kind of where I would be concerning. But it's definitely a great selection if you're not sold on an offensive lineman, if you're not sold on Derek Harmon, if you're not sold on a wide receiver. And with this one, it looks like the Cincinnati Bengals are now on the clock at 17th overall. Our lovely friend Parker making the selection here. I almost feel like it's got to be some form of edge rusher, whether that's Jalen Walker, whether that's Shamar Stewart. Ryan Sparks cursing me up and down for saying that. Even if you go other options. But Drew, where do you think Cincinnati goes here at 17th overall?
Yeah, this is my guy, Parker. We podcast all the time, every single week. I've picked his brain about the Bengals draft strategy. And this is not how I expect the board to fall for Cincinnati. There's a couple of options.
Can you hear me, Alex? Yeah.
And I think that there's probably 3 different directions you could go on the front seven that I know my guy Parker loves. He's a big James Pierce fan. We just talked about him. Whether or not you are worried about the character concerns, do you take him this early? I think Shamar Stewart, another guy Parker's really high on. Like I mentioned, great fit for that defense. They really need some juice on that front seven. And Jalen Walker, another guy Parker loves, has fallen further than we thought he would. Is the slide going to stop? I don't know if you get scared of the measurements. They got another, Jermaine Pratt, his future is very, very questionable in Cincinnati. If you see Jalen Walker as an inside linebacker, you have a future solution there. So there's a lot of front seven options here. And this is another team. They could go safety. Both safeties are still on the board. That's a question for them. You could see DB, with Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson off the board. I'm not sure I see that. I think it's probably front seven, but there's a lot of defensive options they could go. How are you feeling, Bill?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. There's a lot of defensive options. Obviously, you look at the edges still here. Nick Scourton's a guy I'm high on. James Pierce Jr. you talked about. Princely Umon-Mielen, Shamar Stewart. If they go outside the box and they go safety, Malaki Starks is still here. Nick Eamon-Wari is still here. There's a lot of talent defensively that Cincinnati could go with. Obviously, if you want to just go all insane, tight end is another option you could go with as well with Colston Loveland. Yes, they have Mike Gesicki, but if you want to run some 12 personnel, that's another way to go too. So while we wait on Cincinnati's pick, right now we're 16 picks in. We're halfway through the first round of the Epic Mock 25. Folks, if you're sticking with us and you're watching, make sure like the video, make sure you hit the notification bell, make sure you subscribe to the NFL Draft Fanatic, No I in Fanatic YouTube channel to get notified of daily draft content. We appreciate you spending time with us. Drew, 16 picks in. What's the biggest shock been for you so far?
Oh, I mean, that's a tough one to answer with how many shocks we've had. Tyler Warren at 5, that whole trade scenario with Jacksonville has still been a massive shock to me. I think Ezieruaku going this high, it's 100% in that range on my board. I didn't expect that from other people. So Ezieruaku going up that high is a nice surprise for me. I think the Jets trading back and still landing Armand Membou at that point is crazy. Jihaad Campbell probably still lands as the biggest surprise to me going in the top 10. But there's been so many, I don't know how you choose at this point, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Tyler Warren ending up at the top 5 is probably the biggest surprise.
Yep.
The other one, we always talked about it, coming into the draft, Shamar Stewart being this athletic, uber talented athlete, going to go in the top 10, 8 to Carolina. He's started to slide, and other edges have gone ahead of him. Donovan Ezieruaku, Mykel Williams from Georgia, things like that. So those are the big question marks that you have to have. But right now, Drew, as we sit here, 17th overall.
And I do believe I've just gotten a text from the man himself, the GM, straight to the line. The pick right here is going to be 17th overall, the Bengals, safety Malaki Starks out of Georgia to Cincinnati.
Love it. Yep, that's one of the players we talked about. Was Malaki Starks, a true stud on the back end of the defense. He's kind of fallen by paralysis by analysis, and then obviously Nicky Manwari is immediately awesome testing. So he's kind of fallen down the board a little bit. He was my safety 2A, 2B behind Xavier Watts, but I think he's still a good talent. Drew, how do you feel about Malaki Starks?
Yeah, again, we keep talking about like the same thing happened back-to-back Cardinals and Bengals. We talk about the front seven all the way leading up to the pick, and then they go right to the secondary. But I think, safety's been a position of need for the Bengals after moving Dax Hill to corner. I'm right there, like you said, the 1A, 1B for me with Nick Emenwari and Malaki Starks. I have Emenwari slightly higher. But I think Starks, he's such a versatile piece. He's so smart, got great instincts, incredibly disciplined in coverage. He didn't test quite as well as people thought, but I think when you watch him on tape, the athleticism is so clear. The ball skills are amazing. I don't have any questions about Malaki Starks personally. I don't see many question marks there. And I think Starks has the versatility to play outside DB as well. Not that Cincinnati necessarily needs that, but he's a guy you can kind of flex around the secondary, in my opinion. A lot of people could have been pining for front seven for the Bengals. They need that help. I don't think you can go wrong with a Malaki Starks pick, much like we were saying with Jahdae Barron. I think this is just an incredibly safe pick in the mid-teens to add some talent to your secondary.
Yeah, no, 100%. So Seattle's on the clock here now, and obviously one of the common names that's been mocked here is Nicky Manwari to South Carolina, gets his Kyle Hamilton version, in the Pacific Northwest. So we could go back-to-back safeties here. Obviously, you could look on the interior offensive line. Is this another guard selection that you're going to look at? Obviously, you could still look along the defense as well. But, Drew, if you're Seattle, what's the best selection you're looking here for the Seahawks?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one for Seattle because they even talk about guard a lot. Maybe Gray Zabel, Donovan Jackson, Tyler Booker. There's the whole positional value debate. Do you take a guard this high? I understand that. I think Emenwari still being here for a guy like Mike McDonald in that defense who can be kind of that floating, that robber, that weapon, maybe even a weak side linebacker sometimes with his size and how creative Mike McDonald likes to get. Like he had Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore. Does he get his Kyle Hamilton in Nick Emenwari here in Seattle? I think that's absolutely on the board. But there's still so much talent. Seattle's another team that could stand to add an edge, and Shamar Stewart is still on the board. Jalen Walker is still on the board. So guys we've been talking about as top 10, top 12 picks for basically this entire draft cycle are slipping almost to the 20s at this point. So I think, I don't want to keep saying front seven because every time I talk about the front seven, they go secondary. So I would not be surprised with the Nick Emenwari pick here, but there's a lot of talent left on the board that could go a lot of different directions here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously there's still a lot of talent here, Drew, like you mentioned. Who's the best available players, the 2-3 best available players on your board right now currently?
To me, it's the two I just mentioned between Shamar Stewart and Jalen Walker. Those are both top 10 players on my board. And actually, I think it's all three because Nick Emenwari would be right up next. And Luther Burden, but like we said, with that character concerns, I understand. Mine is purely based off film grade, so if people are worried about the character concerns, I understand why he falls. But yeah, I think the front seven is clearly what sticks out right now between like Jalen Walker and Shamar Stewart both being top 10 players on my board. Them continuing to slip has been really surprising to me, honestly. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, no. So my top players, obviously Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, Luther Burden, you hit it, from Missouri. I don't see those character concerns. I hear them. I've seen them out there, but it just feels like a little bit of smoke as we've started to move into this portion of the draft season. But obviously, some other names, Ben Morrison from Notre Dame. We talked about Elikai Manor from Stanford. So there's some wide receiver talent here. Nick Emenwari. Josh Simmons, even though he's a tackle, could he play some guard? What's that conversation look like? And as you move further down the list, Colston Loveland as well in Seattle, still here.
That's a fun one.
That'd be a fun selection here. So I would think if you're Seattle, we've kind of hammered it home that they need to go front seven. But again, what's the conversation as far as the value versus, selecting an offensive player? Obviously, you have Sam Darnold at the helm. And I'll play devil's advocate. Could Seattle look at a quarterback here?
Oh, do we get Jackson Dart snuck into the top 20 right here at the very back?
I would say, could we see it?
I mean, that it's a fun option. There's been so much. Again, I don't want to rule anything out with how much chaos we've had. We've had like multiple trades in the top 10. It's so crazy with how things have gone right now. The chaos is just it's crazy. But how many guys are left? Like I've mentioned, already 100 times. Jalen Walker and Shamar Stewart being here. Like, there's so much talent in the front seven. Nick Emenwari. There's so much defensive talent. Colston Loveland was a fun one that you mentioned. There's so many great players at positions of need for Seattle. I don't know that you can justify a reach on a quarterback at the current minute. But if you feel like, we say it every year, if you feel like a quarterback is your guy, you go up and get him regardless. So if they feel like Dart is a guy that can be the future for them, I don't think that you let anything stop you from there.
Absolutely. So I always throw it out there because obviously quarterbacks are premium. Sam Darnold's deal, the way it's structured, they have an out after the first year.
Yeah, that's a 1 year deal, basically.
It's a 1 year deal with a bunch of extra fluff and money. So it wouldn't shock me to see them go quarterback. Ultimately, I think they probably wait till day 2. But wouldn't shock me to see them go that way here. But as we move through the NFL draft and we move through Epic Mock 25, definitely a lot of players still available, definitely a lot of talent. Which pick so far, Drew, has been, I won't say the most surprising, but the most disappointing to you?
Ooh, that's a fun one. We're going to throw some shots at some of the draft professors in the chat right here. You got to make me be the villain.
Yeah. I'll bounce back right behind you.
I'll go ahead and call out my buddy Parker because that's all in good fun. I can't believe he passed on a front seven guy for Malaki Starks there. I still like Malaki Starks as a player, but Jalen Walker and Shamar Stewart being there on the board for that Bengals front seven, I have a hard time with that pick. I think you absolutely take one of them there. The Tyler Warren pick, I go back to that. For a team that's in as bad of a state as the Giants are right now, I just don't know that I can see a tight end that isn't Brock Bowers in the top 5 that with the state of that roster. But overall, I haven't really been too upset at any of these picks. I think they're all pretty good. But yeah, if I had to point out 2, it's probably between Starks and Warren.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't mean to poke fun at New York, but the Warren pick, they had a plan. They gambled, and I appreciate the gamble, but it just didn't work out that way. It didn't shake out that way. The one that I still hark back on, we talked about it earlier in the show, was the Mason Graham pick. I get going up to get your guy, but when the teams ahead of you had a needed edge, I would have sat. If you're going to trade up, make it for an edge rusher, make it for a quarterback. There's some positional value, and I don't know if Mason Graham moves the needle as much defensive tackle-wise to make that move. Granted, they didn't give up a lot of capital outside of a 2026 second-round selection, but there's still a lot to kind of sift through there. But as we wait on the Seattle pick, we'll take a wrap around in the NFL news that TJ Watt, in the final year of his deal, posting on Instagram a picture of him giving the peace sign to Pittsburgh.
Oh, yep.
Drew, let's have a little fun here. Do you think TJ Watt gets moved tonight?
Whether it's tonight or tomorrow, I would be surprised to see TJ Watt leave this mock draft still a Pittsburgh Steeler. If I know Will, I think he's probably on the phone lines as we speak, trying to move TJ Watt. He's a great player, continues to be one of the top edge rushers in the league, but you're going to have to make him the highest paid. You're going to have to match that Myles Garrett contract. And I don't know if that's a realistic possibility for Pittsburgh right now, especially with him getting older. I don't know if you look to just kind of cut your losses and get a huge amount of draft capital right now. If Seattle wants, Pittsburgh, if they want to grab, a quarterback at 21, whether that's, Jalen Miller, or Dart, if they want to take a swing at 21 and they get back up in the first round to add like a Derek Harmon or an interior defensive line help, that's a very valuable piece. And I would not be surprised at all to see TJ Watt get moved. How about you, Bill?
No, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think if Will's watching and listening somewhere, he's probably cursing us out up one side and down the other. But I think TJ Watt ultimately does get moved. I think the conversation you have to have is how much do you want to pay a player on the downswing of their career, what you're going to have to pay him, especially with the deals to Max Crosby and the deals to Myles Garrett. You're going to have to pay a pretty penny. And do you want to allocate that much money when you have questions all up and down your entire team, including at quarterback? We don't know who this quarterback, and it looks like the pick is in. Seattle goes Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. Wow. I like this one, though. I like getting a Robin for Jackson Smith and Jigba, but Drew, how do you feel about Matthew Golden here?
Yeah, I love Matthew Golden as a player. He's been right barely behind Luther Bird as my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 for a little bit. Again, like with the amount of front 7 talent on the board and the needs there, I think I probably would have rather gone there. But if you're not going to, getting Matthew Golden, Seattle, after trading for Cooper Kupp and you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, there is a glaring lack of an outside receiver on that team. Those guys are both going to be stuck in the slot at this point in their careers. You need a guy who can play on the outside, whether that's Z or X. And I think Matthew Golden is probably the most versatile receiver in this entire draft class. I would feel comfortable putting Matthew Golden at any wide receiver position, whether that's slot, whether that's Z, whether that's X. I think Matthew Golden, he has the size, he has the athleticism, he has the ball tracking skills, the hands at the catch point. I think he's an incredibly well-rounded receiver, very versatile. And Seattle could really put him anywhere they wanted.
And you definitely sniped New England. So I knew that New England was looking to trade up to get Golden. So Seattle, I'm trying to remember who has that. Halil, is that you with Seattle? Drop that into the chat. But I like Halil. I think that was a really good pick. But I also want to point out something about, let's say, the player grades at this point. So there's a lot of comments about the edges are dropping. But we're at the point now of the draft board where the grades between player 20 and player 62 are really close.
Yeah, right? For sure. That's been a – you go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and in this draft class, we talked about that for so long where the top-end talent in this draft class is so thin that when you get past that small first group, the grades are going to be so similar. You're going to see so many – I think we see so many shocks on actual draft day in about 2 weeks. Because like you mentioned, these grades are so close. Teams, it's just a pick your poison at this point. Like teams are looking for a specific flavor of player.
Yep, and you have to play scarcity.
Yep.
So if you're Seattle and you need interior offensive line and you need receiver, the receiver quality, in my opinion, at the high end is scarce, right? Because at this point, Golden is the second receiver, right? Because Igbukah is still there, Burden is still there, Higgins is still there.
Yep.
Right? So he's the second receiver off. But we're probably about to see a run on receivers.
Yep.
Right. And we're going to see a run on some positions that aren't edges, in my opinion. So any GM that like I see in the group chats, if you have an offer that you'll trade down to 30, contact Randall. So the reason I've been on and off camera, we had to get the Bills war room up, because this draft is moving much faster than we thought. So any GM listening, Buffalo may trade up, but we're not going to pay full price.
Nobody's interested in a fair trade, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's just more of like anyway, Buffalo will trade up, but we're not going to pay full price.
And I think with the next pick too. Oh, you had it, Bill. Sorry.
I was going to say, Jim's on full clearance right there. He said 75% off, and we'll slide down for you. But you're not getting full price out of him. He's ready. But no, go ahead, Drew. What were you thinking?
Yeah, with Tampa being on the board here, I think this is a really, really interesting pick. Because this is a team, again, I'll keep going 4 picks in a row, that probably has the biggest hole at edge and inside linebacker that we've seen so far. This is a team that past Levante David, who we saw have injury issues, he's probably in the last year or two of his career. This is a team that had no inside linebackers last year. That was probably one of the worst position groups in the entire NFL. So Jalen Walker falling this far, even if you see him as an edge like I do, for a guy that has the potential and the experience playing inside linebacker, how do you let him slip past 19? Is this a place you pull the trigger on Jalen Walker, Bill?
The only conversation that I have is between Jalen Walker and Shamar Stewart.
I agree.
Because, yes, they have that need at inside linebacker, but they have just as big a need as edge. I think Jalen Walker can fit both roles, but the conversation, if you're Todd Bowles, do I want a high upside athletic guy like Shamar Stewart, or do I want a linebacker guy like Jalen Walker? And joining us in the studio now, we've got Price Carter. Price, welcome to a crazy epic mock 25 where we've seen everybody and their mother seem to trade up, trade down. How you doing tonight, man?
Price, do you have audio yet? Can you hear us?
Oh, maybe. Looks like Price is still dealing with some technical stuff.
Yep.
So as we
technical stuff, we have a shift change at the draft professor coming up real soon. But Bill, while we're waiting, this is probably a good place when we divide up the recording. Let's pause for some station identification. You want to let these fine people know who you are and how they can find all of your content.
Absolutely. So obviously you can find all of my content over on X at Spark Scouting. All of my takes, all of my posts are there. I also am a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. So you can find all of my written work there. You can also catch me here on Wednesday nights on The Late Show on Mrs. R Relevant podcast here with Jim and my lovely co-host Jacob Roach, who's not with us tonight. Drew, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find pretty much all of my ball talk, the cut-ups, the film analysis on at Iron City Film on Twitter or X. That's where most of my content is. I also do some writing, some Titans and draft writing for StadiumRant.com, who's drafting for the Patriots on here. Those wonderful people running that site. They have been really active in the chat, working as an admin, tweeting it out. Shout out to them. I'm also running the NFL draft branch for Fantasy Trading Room. We're starting that channel up. I will be live streaming my Titans War Room for days 2 and 3 on that channel tomorrow and Saturday. And yeah, pretty much everything I do is at Iron City Film. You can find pretty much everything there.
Okay, and Price, we have audio now.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what was going on there. It was weird. I think I was connected to my AirPods or something upstairs. I'm not sure, but I can hear you.
You want to introduce yourself to our fine audience here. We have a lot of people watching.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Price Carter. I cover the Kansas City Chiefs and the NFL draft, predominantly for Arrowhead Addict, which is part of Fansided. And there I also do year-round coverage. I podcast for them daily and also work for FTN Fantasy as well, do charting and data for their season and data that they collect. So excited to be here and excited to talk about the draft. This is a really cool, fun event. And it's, I think this is the best of it, right? Where you get people who really know the teams, know the ins and the outs of what their team's like, their thresholds, what their true needs are. None of that crappy mock drafting where you got someone national giving the Chiefs a guard at 31. Real hard-hitting analysis. They lost Joe Tooney. Give them Gray Zabel. So none of that.
Right. Cool. Absolutely.
So you can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. The best thank you can do right now is to hit subscribe on YouTube. We are draft professors. We have draft professors from many NFL teams, not all. There are 52 of us. You're seeing 4 of us on camera. There are 48 people behind the scenes. I do want to give a shout out to a couple that are making this event hum. Jolene, if you are listening right now, you are doing an incredibly good